The cholesterol conundrum. Lots of questions afloat today about cholesterol, high cholesterol, its role in heart disease. I think the literature does show and does prove that high cholesterol, certainly not in all cases, but high cholesterol can encourage atherosclerosis, hardening of the arteries, reduction in the opening of the vessel walls. But is that the only issue with heart disease? I really don't believe that it is. There are so many other factors. Heavy metals like mercury have been implicated in encouraging atherosclerosis. Poorly absorbed forms of calcium, as we see recently in the literature, are also implicated to atherosclerosis. C-reactive protein, HSCRP, a marker for inflammation. Lipoprotein little a being elevated is an indicator. HSCRP can be an independent risk factor, the inflammatory process. We know that homocysteine levels that are elevated. So those are all other, I believe, secondary components and certainly areas that I'd like to discuss regarding cardiovascular disease and heart disease. But if we're just going to take cholesterol today, what's the truth with cholesterol? Number one, we know that up to 50% of the heart attacks that occur, folks do not have elevated cholesterol. So cholesterol in and of itself, we've got to understand, is not itself a risk factor, in my opinion. I don't believe the literature bears that out. Yet cardiology and the world of medicine treats cholesterol much that way. It's all about cholesterol, lower cholesterol, and we reduce your incidence of heart disease. Now, no doubt, we do see that when folks go on statins, there's a reduction in the incidence of heart disease. Is that just because it's the cholesterol issue, or is it also that we're reducing inflammation, etc.? I think there's more to this. Oxidation of cholesterol becomes important. So let's just start at the beginning. Cholesterol, what is cholesterol? Cholesterol is a structural compound. It is a precursor to all of the steroid hormones that we make, to our testosterone, to our estrogen, to our progesterone, our adrenal hormones, cortisol, DHEA. So cholesterol is a structural compound. It also is involved in the conversion of vitamin D in our skin through ultraviolet rays, through sunlight. We also know that it is involved literally in membrane protection, protecting literally the structure, the cell structures. So, is cholesterol in and of itself evil? No. What I believe the issue really is when cholesterol oxidizes or goes bad. Oxidation of LDL cholesterol, when the cholesterol goes bad, is really where the problem is. We'll talk a little bit later in this teaching about how we reduce that process by reducing the amount of oxidation or cellular rust or damage to cholesterol. Is cholesterol implicated in general terms to peripheral artery disease? Yes. Cardiovascular disease? Yes. Stroke risk? Yes. But I believe that demonizes cholesterol. We don't consider the other ancillary factors, as I will teach you. A couple of the basics. Cholesterol can be related to some hereditary conditions, and sometimes we have some inborn errors of metabolism, some genetic defects that makes us more susceptible to producing higher cholesterol. Now notice I said that producing higher cholesterol. About 80% of the cholesterol that we make is produced in the liver. It's not always through what we ingest. Although what we ingest in the way of bad fats, rancid fats, etc., can play a key role here. 80%, give or take, of what we have circulating in our bloodstream is produced by our liver. So many times a congested liver, a liver that's overwhelmed with a poor diet, processed foods, refined foods, chemicals, etc., interferes with how the liver is metabolizing and breaking down the cholesterol. So we have to look at it in a broader perspective than just cholesterol is bad, let's take a drug and let's lower cholesterol. Cholesterol is also involved in the digestive process, especially in the processing and the handling of bile. Why many times if you look and see that stones that are formed, they are cholesterol that has not been properly processed and broken down. So, is there a dietary link to this? Yes. Is there a hereditary genetic? Yes. The dietary aspect, though, is not just about eating high-fat foods. It's about eating saturated fats, trans fatty acids, more processed foods, less real foods, less plant-based foods, of which we will certainly explain. As we talk about this, I want you to keep an open mind about the role of cholesterol and cholesterol and heart disease, but understand that you've got to keep in context that cholesterol is involved in a lot of other bodily functions that are critical to human health and physiology. Fibrous vegetables become a key area here. We're not consuming enough fibrous types of vegetables. Vegetables that have a non-starchy component. We're not talking about corn. We're not talking about potatoes. We're talking about vegetables that are loaded with fiber, natural sterolins, natural stanols. This is where we consume, when we consume a lot of these types of vegetables, they naturally help us in the processing, the elimination, the absorption of excess cholesterol. Foodstuffs can play a role in the sense not just that they're high cholesterol foods, but foods that are just not good for us seem to antagonize, I believe, the liver processing and handling of cholesterol. Hence, then we end up with more elevated cholesterol levels. Now, certainly, if you consume a ton of food, a lot of red processed types of meats that's not organically grown, actually some studies show that farm-raised or free-roaming types of beef, etc., and red meats can actually impact cholesterol in a positive way, contrary to popular belief. I really firmly believe that the cholesterol issues that we face and confront today have a lot to do with just a poor diet, not necessarily just high cholesterol foods. Let's move on. I mentioned a word before, oxidizing of LDL cholesterol. What that means is cholesterol going bad or cholesterol going rancid. Think of rust on your car or on a vehicle. That would be the oxidation process that I'm talking about here. How do we protect it? Antioxidants play a key role. Nutrients, minerals such as selenium methionine, the organically bound form of selenium, can have a protective effect in keeping cholesterol. Ascorbates, which is the buffered form of vitamin C, can have a protective effect to cholesterol and keeping it from becoming oxidized. The right forms of E, not synthetic or over-the-counter DL-tocopherol acetates, tocopheryl acetates. I'm talking about mixed tocopherols and tocotrienols, all 8 isomers that have alpha, beta, gamma, delta tocotrienol, alpha, beta, gamma, delta tocopherol. That is the full complex of vitamin E. Protective nutrients. Quality forms of omega-3 800s can have a critical role in protecting your cholesterol level. So oxidation of cholesterol, cholesterol that goes bad, is really our key issue here today. Low antioxidant status, a diet that is minimal in antioxidants. That is a very key component here. We eat a lot of foods that are not rich in colors. We eat a diet that is very white and refined, processed, the typical standard American diet. We don't eat beans, we don't eat colors in vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, spinach. We don't eat real antioxidants in our foods. So I believe maintaining the oxidation process is really a key, protecting the cholesterol that's there. Chemicals in our foods not only can overwhelm the liver, chlorine, fluoride, etc., seem to play a role in encouraging the oxidation. And it's not just chlorine and fluorine, but other chemicals that we're exposed to encourage the oxidation of cholesterol. This is part 1 in a series of cholesterol. Managing your cholesterol. What's the role in heart disease, circulatory diseases, stroke? What's the truth behind cholesterol? How to naturally lower your cholesterol. This is part 1, giving you some background. Stay tuned for part 2, and we'll start talking about ways to improve the processing, handling, and metabolism of cholesterol.